Krishna, my dear devotees. Welcome back to the daily readings of Srila Prabhupada's books right here in the live studios in Hythe, Kent, southeast England, just near the English Channel. We can see it from our window, actually. On this holy Rama Ekadasi, we hope you are healthy and happy and safe and well in all respects, and we'll get right into it. Srimad Bhagavata Mahima Stotram from Sri Krishna Lila Stava by Sanatana Goswami glorifies the Bhagavatam specifically, but it also indirectly glorifies the Gita because it's coming from Krishna, and therefore we read it every day, even though we're reading the Bhagavad-gita now every day. Okay, it goes like this. Sarva Shastrabdi Piyusha Sarva Vedaika Satpala Sarva Siddhanta Ratnaja Sarva Lokaika Drik Prada. O nectar from the ocean of all scriptures, singular fruit of all the Vedas, rich mine of the precious gems of all conclusive truths, you are the only giver of sight to all the worlds. Sarva Bhagavata Prana Srimad Bhagavata Prabho Kalidwandoditaditya Sri Krishna Parivartita. O life air of all the Supreme Lord's devotees, O Master Srimad Bhagavatam, you are the sun risen in the darkness of Kali. You are the exact image of Sri Krishna. Paramananda Pataya Prema Varshakshadayate Sarvada Sarvasevyaya Shri Krishnaya Namostume. I bow down to you, who are supremely blissful to read. Your every syllable pours down a flood of prema. You can always be served by everyone. You are Shri Krishna himself. Madeka Bando Matsangin Madgudo Man Mahadana Mannishtadaga Mad Bhagya Mad Anandanamostute. My only friend, my constant companion, my spiritual master, my great wealth, my savior, my good fortune, my source of ecstasy, I bow down to you. Asadu Saduta Dayin Atini Chochata Kada Hanamun Chikadachin Mam Premna Rit Kantayokspuda. O bestower of saintliness to the unsaintly, O exalter of the most fallen, please never leave me. Always appear in my heart and my voice with pure love. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we've reached chapter 5, starting on text 26. We'll be finishing this chapter very quickly because there's only 29 verses in this chapter. But this chapter leads right into the next chapter anyway. So we'll start the 6th chapter also tonight for your pleasure. Hare Krishna. Bhagavad-gita As It Is, chapter 5, text 26. Kama Krodha Vimuktanam Yatinam Yatachetasam Abhito Brahmanirvanam Vartate Viditatmanam. Those who are free from anger and all material desires, who are self-realized, self-disciplined, and constantly endeavoring for perfection, are assured of liberation in the Supreme in the very near future. Purport. Of the saintly persons who are constantly engaged in striving towards salvation, one who is in Krishna consciousness is the best of all. The Bhagavatam 4:22, 39, confirms this fact as follows. Yat pada pankaja palasha vilasa bhaktya karmashayam gratitim udgratayanti santaha tadvanarikta matayo yatayo pirudha shutto ganastam adunam vajabasudevam. Just try to worship in devotional service Vasudeva, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Even great sages who were not able to control the forces of the senses as effectively as those who were engaged in transcendental bliss by serving the lotus feet of the Lord, uprooting the deep-grown desire for fruitive activities. In the conditioned soul, the desire to enjoy the fruitive results of work is so deep-rooted that it is very difficult, even for the great sages, to control such desires, despite great endeavors. A devotee of the Lord, constantly engaged in devotional service, a devotee of the Lord, constantly engaged in devotional service, in Krishna consciousness, perfect in self-realization, very quickly attains liberation in the Supreme. Owing to his complete knowledge in self-realization, he always remains in trance. To cite an analogous example of this, Darshana Dhyana Sangsparshaya Matsya Kurma Vihangamaha Swanyapatyani Pushnanti Tataham Apipadmaja. By vision, by meditation, and by touch only do the fish, the tortoise, and the birds maintain their offspring. Similarly, do I also, O Padmaja. The fish brings up its offspring simply by looking at them. The tortoise brings up its offspring simply by meditation. The eggs of the tortoise are laid on land, and the tortoise meditates on the eggs while in the water. Similarly, the devotee in Krishna consciousness, although far away from the Lord's abode, can elevate himself to that abode simply by thinking of him constantly. By engagement in Krishna consciousness, he does not feel the pangs of material miseries. This state of life is called Brahma Nirvana, or the absence of material miseries due to being constantly immersed in the Supreme. Texts 27 and 28. Sparshan kritva bahir bhayanj chakshus chaidvan tode bruvoho prana pranau samau kritva nasabhyantadacharino yatendriya mano buddhir munir moksha pradayanaha vigatet jabaya krodo yaksada mukta eva saha. Shutting out all external sense objects, keeping the eyes and vision concentrated between the two eyebrows, suspending the inward and outward breaths within the nostrils, and thus controlling the mind, senses, and intelligence, the transcendentalist, aiming at liberation, becomes free from desire, fear, and anger. One who is always in this state is certainly liberated. Purport. Being engaged in Krishna consciousness, one can immediately understand one's spiritual identity. And then one can understand the Supreme Lord by means of devotional service. When one is well situated in devotional service, one comes to the transcendental position, qualified to feel the presence of the Lord in the sphere of one's activity. This particular position is called liberation in the Supreme. After explaining the above principles of liberation in the Supreme, the Lord gives instruction to Arjuna as to how one can come to that platform by the practice of the mysticism of yoga known as Ashtanga yoga, which is divisible into eightfold procedure called an eightfold procedure called yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, and samadhi. In the 6th chapter, the subject of yoga is explicitly detailed, and at the end of the 5th, it is only preliminarily explained. One has to drive out the sense objects such as sound, touch, form, taste, and smell by the pratyahara process in yoga, and then keep the vision of the eyes between the two eyebrows and concentrate on the tip of the nose with half-closed eyes. There is no benefit in closing the eyes altogether, because then there is every chance of falling asleep. Nor is there benefit in opening the eyes completely, because then there is the hazard of being attracted by sense objects. The breathing movement is restrained within the nostrils by neutralizing the up-moving and down-moving air within the body. By practice of such yoga, one is able to gain control over the senses, refrain from outward sense objects, and thus prepare oneself for liberation in the Supreme. This yoga process helps one become free from all kinds of fear and anger, and thus feel the presence of the Supersoul in the transcendental situation. In other words, Krishna consciousness is the easiest process of executing yoga principles. This will be thoroughly explained in the next chapter. A Krishna conscious person, however, being always engaged in devotional service, does not risk losing his senses to some other engagement. This is a better way of controlling the senses than by the Ashtanga yoga. Text 29. Bhokdarang yagatapasang sarvaloka maheshwaram suridang sarvabhutanang yatma mam shantimrichchati. A person in full consciousness of me, knowing me to be the ultimate beneficiary of all sacrifices and austerities, the Supreme Lord of all planets and demigods, and the benefactor and well-wisher of all living entities, attains peace from the pangs of material miseries. Purport. The conditioned souls within the clutches of the illusory energy are all anxious to attain peace in the material world, but they do not know the formula for peace, which is explained in this part of the Bhagavad-gita. The greatest peace formula is simply this: Lord Krishna is the beneficiary in all human activities. Men should offer everything to the transcendental service of the Lord, because he is the proprietor of all planets and the demigods thereon. No one is greater than he. He is greater than the greatest of the demigods, Lord Shiva and Lord Brahma. In the Vedas, Shvetashvatara Upanishad 6-7, the Supreme Lord is described as Tam Ishwaranam Paramam Maheshwaram. Under the spell of illusion, living entities are trying to be lords of all they survey, but actually they are dominated by the material energy of the Lord. The Lord is the master of material nature, and the conditioned souls are under the strict rules of material nature. Unless one understands these bare facts, it is not possible to achieve peace in the world, either individually or collectively. This is the essence of Krishna consciousness. Lord Krishna is the supreme predominator, and all living entities, including the great demigods, are his subordinates. One can attain perfect peace only in complete Krishna consciousness. This 5th chapter is a practical explanation of Krishna consciousness, generally known as Karma Yoga. The question of mental speculation, as to how Karma Yoga can give liberation is answered herewith. To work in Krishna consciousness is to work with the complete knowledge of the Lord as the predominator. Such work is not different from transcendental knowledge. Direct Krishna consciousness is Bhakti Yoga, and Jnana Yoga is a path leading to Bhakti Yoga. Krishna consciousness means to work in full knowledge of one's relationship with the Supreme Absolute. And the perfection of this consciousness is full knowledge of Krishna, or the Supreme Personality of Godhead. A pure soul is the eternal servant of God as his fragmental part and parcel. He comes into contact with Maya, illusion, due to the desire to lord it over Maya, and that is the cause of his many sufferings. As long as he is in contact with matter, he has to execute work in terms of material existence by practice in the material world. The more one is advanced, the more he is freed from the clutches of matter. The Lord is not partial toward anyone. Everything depends on one's practical performance of duties in Krishna consciousness, which in every respect helps one control the senses and conquer the influence of desire and anger. And one who stands fast in Krishna consciousness, controlling the above-mentioned passions, remains factually in the transcendental stage, or Brahma Nirvana. The Eightfold Yoga mysticism is automatically practiced in Krishna consciousness because the ultimate purpose is served. There is a gradual process of elevation in the practice of yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, and samadhi. But these only preface perfection by devotional service, which alone can award peace to the human being. It is the highest perfection of life. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports to the 5th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavad-gita in the matter of Karma Yoga, or action in Krishna consciousness. Jai, all glories to Sri Krishna, the owner and controller and proprietor and beneficiary and best friend of everyone. Hare Krishna. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports, the 5th chapter, the 6th of the Srimad Bhagavad-gita in the matter of Karma Yoga, or action in Krishna consciousness. And now we will go right into chapter 6, because he hints at this process at the end of chapter 5. Dhyana Yoga. Ashtanga Yoga, a mechanical meditative practice, controls the mind and the senses and focuses concentration on the Paramatma, the Supersoul, the form of the Lord situated in the heart. This practice culminates in Samadhi, full consciousness of the Supreme. Text 1. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Anashritak Karma Palam Karyam Karma Karotiyaha Sasanyasi Chayogi Cha Na Niragnir Nachakriyaha. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, one who is unattached to the fruits of his work and who works as he is obligated is in the renounced order of life. And he is the true mystic not he who lights no fire and performs no duty. Purport. In this chapter, the Lord explains that the process of the Eightfold Yoga system is a means to control the mind and the senses. However, this is very difficult for people in general to perform, especially in the age of Kali. Although the Eightfold Yoga system is recommended in this chapter, the Lord emphasizes that the process of Karma Yoga, or acting in Krishna consciousness, is better. Everyone acts in this world to maintain his family and their paraphernalia, but no one is working without some self-interest, some personal gratification, be it concentrated or extended. The criterion of perfection is to act in Krishna consciousness and not with a view to enjoying the fruits of work. To act in Krishna consciousness is the duty of every living entity, because all are constitutionally parts and parcels of the Supreme. The parts of the body work for the satisfaction of the whole body. The limbs of the body do not act for self-satisfaction, but for the satisfaction of the complete whole. Similarly, the living entity who acts for satisfaction of the Supreme Whole and not for personal satisfaction is the perfect sannyasi, the perfect yogi. The sannyasis sometimes artificially think that they have become liberated from all material duties, and therefore they cease to perform Agni-hotra yagyas, fire sacrifices. But actually, they are self-interested, because their goal is to become one with the impersonal Brahman. Such a desire is greater than any material desire, but it is not without self-interest. Such a desire is greater than any material desire, but it is not without self-interest. Similarly, the mystic yogi who practices the yoga system with half-open eyes, ceasing all material activities, desires some satisfaction for his personal self. But a person acting in Krishna consciousness works for the satisfaction of the whole, without self-interest. A Krishna conscious person has no desire for self-satisfaction. His criterion of success is the satisfaction of Krishna. And thus, he is the perfect sannyasi, or perfect yogi. Lord Chaitanya, the highest perfectional symbol of renunciation, prays in this way: Na dhanam, na janam, na sundarim, kabitam va jagadisha kamaye, mama janmani, janmanishware, bhavatad, bhaktir haituki twayi. O Almighty Lord, I have no desire to accumulate wealth, nor to enjoy beautiful women, nor do I want any number of followers. What I want only is the causeless mercy of your devotional service in my life, birth after birth. Text 2. Yang sannyasam iti prahur yogam tang vidipandava na yasanyasta sankalpo yogi bhavati kaschana. What is called renunciation, you should know to be the same as yoga, or linking oneself with the Supreme, O son of Pandu. For one can never become a yogi unless he renounces the desire for sense gratification. Purport. Real sannyas yoga, or bhakti, means that one should know his constitutional position as the living entity and act accordingly. The living entity has no separate independent identity. He is the marginal energy of the Supreme. When he is entrapped by material energy, he is conditioned, and when he is Krishna conscious, or aware of the spiritual energy, then he is in his real and natural state of life. Therefore, when one is in complete knowledge, one ceases all material sense gratification, or renounces all kinds of sense gratificatory activities. This is practiced by the yogis who restrain the senses from material attachment. But a person in Krishna consciousness has no opportunity to engage his senses in anything which is not for the purpose of Krishna. Therefore, a Krishna conscious person is simultaneously a sannyasi and a yogi. The purpose of knowledge, or of restraining the senses as prescribed in the Dhyana and Yoga processes, is automatically served in Krishna consciousness. If one is unable to give up the activities of his selfish nature, then Dhyana and Yoga are of no avail. The real aim is for a living entity to give up all selfish satisfaction and to be prepared to satisfy the Supreme. A Krishna conscious person has no desire for any kind of self-enjoyment. He is always engaged for the enjoyment of the Supreme. One who has no information of the Supreme must therefore be engaged in self-satisfaction, because no one can stand on the platform of inactivity. All purposes are perfectly served by the practice of Krishna consciousness. Text 3. Arurukshor muner yogam karma karanamuchyate yoga rudasya shaiva shamak karanamuchyate. For one who is a neophyte in the Eightfold Yoga system, work is said to be the means. And for one who was already elevated in yoga, cessation of all material activities is said to be the means. Process, purport. The process of linking oneself with the Supreme is called yoga. It may be compared to a ladder for attaining the topmost spiritual realization. This ladder begins from the lowest material condition of the living entity and rises up to perfect self-realization in pure spiritual life. According to various elevations, different parts of the ladder are to be known by different names. But all in all, the complete ladder is called yoga. It may be divided into 3 parts, namely Jnana Yoga, Dhyana Yoga, and Bhakti Yoga. The beginning of the ladder is called the Yoga Rurukshu stage, and the highest rung is called Yoga Rudha. Concerning the Eightfold Yoga system, attempts in the beginning to enter into meditation through regulative principles of life and practice of different sitting postures, which are more or less bodily exercises, are considered fruitive material activities. All such activities lead to achieving perfect mental equilibrium to control the senses. When one is accomplished in the practice of meditation, he ceases all disturbing mental activities. A Krishna conscious person, however, is situated from the beginning on the platform of meditation because he always thinks of Krishna. And being constantly engaged in the service of Krishna, he is considered to have ceased all material activities. What a wonderful paragraph. I'm going to read that one again. A Krishna conscious person, however, is situated from the beginning on the platform of meditation because he always thinks of Krishna. and being constantly engaged in the service of Krishna, he is considered to have ceased all material activities. Prabhupada ki jai. What a wonderful way of putting things Prabhupada had. Text 4. Yada hinendriyarteshu na karmas anusajjate sarvasankalpa sannyasi yogadudastadocchite. Translation. A person is said to be elevated in yoga when, having renounced a person is said to be elevated in yoga when, having renounced all material desires, he neither acts for sense gratification nor engages in fruitive activities. Purport. When a person is fully engaged in the transcendental loving service of the Lord, he is pleased in himself, and thus he is no longer engaged in sense gratification or in fruitive activities. Otherwise, one must be engaged in sense gratification, since one cannot live without engagement. Without Krishna consciousness, one must be always seeking self-centered or extended selfish activities. But a Krishna conscious person can do everything for the satisfaction of Krishna and thereby be perfectly detached from sense gratification. One who has no such realization must mechanically try to escape material desires before being elevated to the top rung of the yoga ladder. Text 5. Udaret atmanatmanam natmanam avasadayat atmaiva yatmano bandhur atmaiva ripuratmanaha. One must deliver himself with the help of his mind and not degrade himself. The mind is the friend of the conditioned soul and his enemy as well. Purport. The word Atma denotes body, mind, and soul, depending upon different circumstances. In the yoga system, the mind and the conditioned soul are especially important. Since the mind is the central point of yoga practice, Atma here, Atma refers here to the mind. The purpose of the yoga system is to control the mind and draw it away from attachment to sense objects. It is stressed herein that the mind must be so trained that it can deliver the conditioned soul from the mire of nations. In material existence, one is subjected to the influence of the mind, and the mind is involved with the... In material existence, one is subjected to the influence of the mind and the senses. In fact, the pure soul is entangled in the material world because the mind is involved with the false ego, which desires to lord it over material nature. Therefore, the mind should be trained so that it will not be attracted by the glitter of material nature. And in this way, the conditioned soul may be saved. One should not degrade oneself by attraction to sense objects. The more one is attracted by sense objects, the more one becomes entangled in material existence. The best way to disentangle oneself is to always engage the mind in Krishna consciousness. The word he is used for emphasizing this point. That is, that one must do this. It is also said, Mana eva manushyanam karanam bandhamokshayoho bandhaya vishaya sango muktyai nirvishayang manaha. For man, mind is the cause of bondage, and mind is the cause of liberation. Mind absorbed in sense objects is the cause of bondage, and mind detached from sense objects is the cause of liberation. Amrita Bindu Upanishad 2. Therefore, the mind which is always engaged in Krishna consciousness is the cause of supreme liberation. Text 6. Bandhuratmatmanastasya yenatmaivatmana jitaha anatmanastu shatrutve varitatmaiva shatruvat. For him who has conquered the mind is the best of friends. But for one who has failed to do so, his mind will remain the greatest enemy. Purport. The purpose of practicing Eightfold Yoga is to control the mind in order to make it a friend in discharging the human mission. Unless the mind is controlled, the practice of yoga for show is simply a waste of time. One who cannot control his mind lives always with the greatest enemy, and thus his life and its mission are spoiled. The constitutional position of a living entity is to carry out the order of the superior. As long as one's mind remains an unconquered enemy, one has to serve the dictations of lust, anger, avarice, illusion, etc. But when the mind is conquered, one voluntarily agrees to abide by the dictation of the personality of Godhead, who is situated within the heart of everyone as Paramatma. Real yoga practice entails meeting the Paramatma within the heart and then following his dictation. For one who takes to Krishna consciousness directly, perfect surrender to the dictation of the Lord follows automatically. Text 7. Jitatmanak prashantasya paramatma samahitaha shitoshna sugadukeshu tata manapamana yoho. For one who has conquered the mind, the super soul is already reached, for he has attained tranquility. To such a man, happiness and distress, heat and cold, honor and dishonor are all the same. Purport. Actually, every living entity is intended to abide by the dictation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is seated in everyone's heart as Paramatma. When the mind is misled by the external illusory energy, one becomes entangled in material activities. Therefore, as soon as one's mind is controlled through one of the yoga systems, one should be considered to have already reached the destination. One has to abide by superior dictation. When one's mind is fixed on the superior nature, he has no alternative but to follow the dictations of the Supreme. The mind must admit some superior dictation and follow it. The effect of controlling the mind is that one automatically follows the dictation of the Paramatma, or Supersoul. Because this transcendental position is at once achieved by one who is in Krishna consciousness, the devotee of the Lord is unaffected by the dualities of material existence, namely distress and happiness, cold and heat, etc. This state is practical samadhi, or absorption in the Supreme. Text 8. Jnana vijnana triptatma kutasto vichitendriyaha yukti it uchate yogi somaloshrashma kanchanaha. A person is said to be fully established in self-realization and is called a yogi or mystic when he is fully satisfied by virtue of acquired knowledge and realization. Such a person is situated in transcendence and is self-controlled. He sees everything, whether it be pebbles, stones, or gold, as the same. Purport. Book knowledge without realization of the Supreme Truth is useless. This is stated as follows. Atak Shri Krishna Namadi Nabhaved Grayamindriyahi Sevan Mukhehi Jivado Swayameva Spurat Jadaha. No one can understand the transcendental nature of the name, form, qualities, and pastimes of Sri Krishna through his materially contaminated senses. Only when one becomes spiritually saturated by transcendental service to the Lord are the transcendental name, form, qualities, and pastimes of the Lord revealed to him. Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu 1-2, 234. This Bhagavad-gita is the science of Krishna consciousness. Shall I repeat that? You would mind? Oh, all right. This Bhagavad-gita is the science of Krishna consciousness. No one can become Krishna conscious simply by mundane scholarship. One must be fortunate enough to associate with a person who is in pure consciousness. A Krishna conscious person has realized knowledge by the grace of Krishna because he is satisfied with pure devotional service. By realized knowledge, one becomes perfect. By transcendental knowledge, one can remain steady in his convictions. But by mere academic knowledge, one can be easily deluded and confused by apparent contradictions. It is the realized soul who is actually self-controlled, because he is surrendered to Krishna. He is transcendental, because he has nothing to do with mundane scholarship. For him, mundane scholarship and mental speculation, which may be as good as gold to others, are of no greater value than pebbles or stones. Oh, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So we'll stop our reading today there at text 8, and tomorrow we'll move on to text 9. Hare Krishna. Very, very interesting chapter, how a Krishna conscious person attains automatically all the stages of the yoga system. So wonderful, so practical. Impossible to translate the Gita like this unless one is fully self-realized. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Bhagavad-gita As It Is ki jai. So if there's any points that stood out in the reading tonight in your minds, please come forward and share it with us for our edification. Hare Krishna.
From Rati Manjari.
Hare Krishna, Rati.
She says, Jai Guru Maharaj.
Jai Rati Manjari.
On and on. From Gopakanya Devi Dasi.
Gopakanya Devi Dasi, Haribol.
Hare Krishna, dear Maharaj and all friends. Happy Ekadashi to everyone. All glories to Maharaj's daily reading service, and all glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Jai, Haribol.
And from Bhaktamatsu.
Haribol Bhaktamatsu.
He says, Jai, all glories to daily readings of Srila Prabhupada's books. In the purport of Srimad Bhagavatam 5.6.16, Srila Prabhupada writes, quote, as a matter of principle, devotees should read, speak, and hear Srimad Bhagavatam persistently, 24 hours daily if possible. That is the recommendation of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Unquote. This ordinarily seemingly impossible feat is made possible by your daily readings. Inspired by your association, we feel encouraged in the morning to take up a serious study of Srimad Bhagavatam according to the format you have taught by your personal example. And all day while we are at work or doing seva at the temple, we can listen to Brihad Bhagavatamrita and other similar literatures made available on your YouTube page, and finally finishing with your live readings in the evenings of Bhagavad-gita As It Is. Thank you for giving us all facilities to hear about Krishna constantly.
Well, thank you very much. That was very lovely encouragement. Thank you so much. Haribol. That's the goal of my life, to make available in sound the direct words of Srila Prabhupada, so that we can do just that. We can hear and meditate on them all day. Hare Krishna, it's perfect Christian consciousness. Thank you very much, Bhaktamatsu.
Next is from Yadutama.
Haribol Yadutama.
Hare Krishna Gurudev, please accept my humble obeisances and all glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Jai Srila Prabhupada.
It will be a little more difficult for me to make the live readings, seeing as Russia does not follow daylight savings. But hearing your readings live is a nectar that is too good to pass up. I have a question. What does Krishna mean when he says that the conquered mind is the best friend?
Because when the mind is conquered by the soul through his intelligence, then the mind becomes submissive to authority. The mind wants to become submissive to the authority. The mind is created in the beginning of the creation by the transformation of the mode of goodness. And therefore it wants to be in equilibrium. It wants to be peaceful. And when it's not, then it cannot be happy. And that's why in the end of the second chapter we hear Nasti Buddha Yuktasya Nacha Yuktasya Bhavana Nacha Bhavya Takshanti Rashantasya Kutasukam. That unless one is connected with Krishna and Krishna consciousness, then one cannot have a peaceful mind or proper intelligence, and therefore without that peace one can't be happy. That's what it means. Hare Krishna.
Next is from Bhakta-rupa.
Haribol Bhakta-rupa.
Thank you very much for reading this evening, Maharaj. Please accept my obeisances. Some really nice verses and purports this evening. My reflection is that there's basically two choices for us to make at any given point: sense gratification or Krishna consciousness.
That's right.
By endeavoring to constantly engage the mind in Krishna consciousness, we can train the mind not to engage in the pursuit of sense gratification, and eventually conquer the mind. From my personal experience, I am being shown that sense gratification never ends well, and gradually I am learning to resist it day by day.
Very good.
Krishna is very kind.
Very good. That's the process. Practice makes perfect. Practice controlling the mind. And I think we heard the word just recently, strenuously. It's the duty of the yogi or the devotee to strenuously try to control his mind and senses.
From Anandamurti Devidasa.
Haribol Anandamurti.
She says, Dear Guru Maharaj and all devotees, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Today I felt how powerful Srila Prabhupada's messages are.
Very good.
Rati Manjari.
Haribol Rati.
She says, Dear Guru Maharaj, please accept my respectful obeisances. Thank you for taking us with you on your divine excavations in Srila Prabhupada's wisdom mines. Nidutama says, Hare Krishna, thank you so much.
Yes, these books are meant to be mined for the gems and the jewels, and practically every sentence is one. So yes, it is fully absorbing. Thank you, Hare Krishna.
Nidutama says, Hare Krishna, thank you so much.
Haribol.
This is from Maxine.
Hare Krishna, Maxine.
Hare Krishna, dearest Maharaj. I am new to reading Srila Prabhupada's books, and I am attending Atma Lounge in Folkestone.
Oh, how nice.
I would like to say that I am so happy to have finally found Krishna and his devotees. It is actual, real living. Thank you for helping me to absorb myself in Krishna. Hare Krishna.
Well, congratulations, Maxine. Congratulations. Well done. We're so happy for you. Please continue. Once it's done, in the sense that once you've become have developed good habits in our mental activities and in our also even in our sensual activities, then it becomes so much easier. Then the mind becomes the friend and becomes naturally attracted to Krishna, because Krishna is all attractive. And everything is, in a sense, in the higher sense, everything is Krishna, because the energies of Krishna transform into the material world. And therefore, we are all actually looking for Krishna, but we're just looking in the wrong place, that's all. It's like looking, for real pleasure, watching a movie, that it's just light flashing on a screen, and there's no real tangible, there's nothing tangible there actually, but it made to look like a real event. Therefore, we become absorbed. So like that, in the material world, the energy is Krishna's energy, and it's just a reflection. It's described earlier, or it's described in the Srimad Bhagavatam, that when Mahavishnu amalgamates, it's a reflective principle, he amalgamates his self into the material world. It's not Krishna, but it is also Krishna. And once you get this in your mind and with your intelligence, that Krishna is everything, but at the same time not everything, because he's the source of everything, then it will be much easier to give up the attachment to the material temporary forms and become attached to the form of Krishna and the forms of Krishna's devotees and devotional service. Because even when they're in the material world, they are eternal. Krishna's form is eternal wherever you see it. Therefore, you see in our, temples and our ashrams, you see wherever you look, you see Krishna, and therefore it's very easy to remember Krishna. So I'm very happy that you connected with the Atma Lounge and Priyakund and Shamagori and all the other lovely devotees there, and the community is gradually growing with sincere persons. And I couldn't be happier to hear this, Maxine. Thank you so much.
Next is from Rati Manjari.
Haribol Rati.
Tonight we heard that the soul is constitutionally meant to engage in devotional service and abide by the direction of the Supersoul. A while ago I heard in a class that what people consider instinct in nature and in the behavior of animals is nothing but the Supersoul directing them. Instinct does not exist. Would you say that this is correct?
Yes? I mean, instinct does exist in the sense that the animals are completely dictated by their senses. They don't have the capacity to formulate words in their mind with their intelligence. They can't think of how to improve themselves. They're just guided. In this sense, there is instinct, because the mind, the ears, the nose, the tongue, and especially in animal species, one of those senses is very prominent. You know, in the fish, the tongue is very prominent. It's so sensitive it can tell something's tasty along the way, a long way away. And the vulture, the birds, they can see things from a long distance away and swoop down and get their prey. But the result of the use of the senses is just to eat and sleep and mate and defend themselves. Because every living being out there is trying to eat one another in one form or another. And when the human beings take up that activity, they become no better than animals. So therefore, we don't want to romanticize either the fact that the Supersoul is directing the animals. That's not true. That's not true. He is in a general sense, but in an actual sense, the senses are directing the animals. The sense objects are directing the animal senses. It's true that the Supersoul gives facility for that, but that isn't the same as the Supersoul giving directions to the human being to think of him. So I would qualify that statement like that. Hare Krishna.
Next is from Gauranga Gopal.
Yes.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, please accept
Haribol Gauranga Gopal.
Please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Jai, all glories to Prabhupada.
I really liked the series of verses 5 to 7 of this chapter 6. The description of the relationship between the mind and the soul is so simply put, and when it is said by Krishna, translated by Srila Prabhupada, and read by you, it becomes so sweet to hear.
Well, Hare Krishna, thank you very much. It should be sweet to hear something that's true. We should never get bored by hearing something that's true, because hearing true things keeps us in the truth, frankly. Hare Krishna. If we don't live in the truth, we can't be happy. No way.
Thank you for helping us conquer our mind by reading every day.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much.
Bhakta Rupa says, Atma Lounge Ki Jai.
Jai Ho.
And the question from Anandamurti.
Yes, Anandamurti.
6 and 7 purports say that when one conquers his mind, he automatically follows the direction of Paramatma. Could you please elaborate on this?
Wait, could you repeat that again? I'm sorry.
The purports to 6 and 7 say that when one conquers his mind, he automatically follows the direction of Paramatma.
Because there's a hierarchy of communication. The soul is covered by all these energies, and what's next to the soul is the false ego, of course, and that dictates to the soul to identify with the body. But then there's the intelligence. This is next to the soul, or almost the same. And intelligence is meant to give discrimination to the mind. So the form direction from the Supersoul, because the Supersoul is above the soul, above the intelligence, above the mind, and above the senses. Sense objects are above the senses in the sense that they control the senses. The mind is above the senses because the mind controls the senses. The intelligence is superior to the mind because it gives discrimination, what is good and what is bad, what will be the result of this activity if I do it. And if the intelligence is in Krishna consciousness, then it directs the mind to Krishna conscious activities, and the mind becomes satisfied. So this dictation, when it comes through the mind to the intelligence, to the soul and the supersoul, then the form direction from the supersoul to the soul comes through the mind and to the intelligence. But if the mind isn't controlled and dominates the intelligence, then that flow of authoritative knowledge won't come through to the mind. Hare Krishna.
This is from Bhakta Sebastian.
Yes, Bhakta Sebastian. Hare Bo.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Today on books, I struggled to do my duty. After a japa walk and reflecting that I had to do it, I did it and thought of all the reasons why not to be afraid. I quickly realized I had to be really personal, and that is scary. But people responded nicely and books went out with a good conversation and good donation and good cooperation between Eden Prabhu, Ananta Prabhu and me. I feel satisfied now, but I am praying that I can regularly absorb myself in Srila Prabhupada's books and your readings, so that I may stay absorbed, or at least intelligent enough to choose right.
A very nice realization and reflection. Thank you very much. I am also sitting here in Hythe, not so far away from London, praying that you will become a full-time book distributor as soon as possible. Hare Krishna. Because it's so pleasing to Prabhupada.
Last comment as of now from Rati Manjari.
Haribo Rati.
She says, thank you. Amazing how the Supersoul cares so much for each and every living entity that he is willing to travel with us ad infinitum. It is simply beyond my understanding.
I heard Gopi Puranadana Prabhu say something very wonderful about this just the other day. He was saying that, Krishna is like a guest in our heart, in a sense, and we're the host. But we're not very good hosts because we just fill the heart up with dirt and dust and nonsense. But Krishna is such a good guest that as soon as we begin to taste and like to hear about Krishna, and Krishna realizes that we're turning our face toward him, he gets out the broom and cleans the place, for us. That's called the perfect guest. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much, everyone. Srimad Bhagavad-gita As It Is, Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari Bol. Thank you very much for being with us today. And please come back tomorrow and spread the joy of hearing the Bhagavad Gita like this in the assembly of like-minded devotees. It is the way home, back to Godhead, for sure. See you tomorrow, same time, same place, same topic, the absolute truth. Hare Krishna.